welcome to my stream. It is a stream today of, as perhaps Dan would say, terrible, terrible, terrible accents. But it is a promo stream, and ethics statement, I've been given a copy of this game for streaming purposes, but all opinions are my own. This is Blind Men. It's published by Ratalaika Games, and I believe I have the developer somewhere. It's developed by Maneater Games, which is just the bestest of names. It came out on the 15th of April. It's a visual novel, and apparently it's a quick completion. But we're going to give it a good couple of playthroughs and see what happens. Actually, first I'm going to sleep. Okay, I'm back now. Alright. Oh, thank you for the host, Radical and Dopey. I just need to remember to turn my TV so I can hear stuff. So we are going to switch to the game. Hello. Yes, Blind Men. It was described as something about playing with villains, and I'm just like, yeah, you know what? I'm good with that. I like a game about villains. Oh god, I love the music already. Okay, so English. Let's not do anything skipping wise. Let's turn the background on down the sound effects. The voices are in Spanish. Go with that. Oh, when I was 7, I was sent to live with my uncle. I had just lost my parents to a car accident, the same one that left the right side of my face disfigured. He did his best to make me feel welcome, but it wasn't enough. Bullied by my peers and ignored by people that were supposed to help me, I didn't fit in anywhere, and I spent most of my childhood thinking it was somehow all of my fault. One day, after I came home crying, my uncle pulled me aside and said to me, "People are fools, Keegan. Blinded by their own stupidity, they seek to destroy what they don't understand. But people like you and me, we're different. We're better. Never forget that." At that moment it all became clear. I finally understood what I had to do. Hello. Hey Leaky. Paul's online. I'd follow my uncle's footsteps and I'd show them. Hi Valbo. So, what do you think? I'm only missing the essay section of the application. I don't know why the League even asks for one. There's nothing particularly evil about good grammar. I laughed nervously at my own bad attempt of making a joke. The League of Evil is the highest authority when it comes to criminal activity around the world. They can make or destroy a supervillain's career with a single word. And even those that don't answer to them know better than to oppose them. Membership is for life, and vacancies are rare and far and in between. Even getting the opportunity to apply is difficult enough. I'm perfectly confident in my ability to deliver a flawless application, of course, but one can never be too sure. Which is exactly how I ended up asking one of my uncle's henchmen for his opinion on my application. It's about passion! Common criminals are a dime a dozen, but being a supervillain requires true dedication. Thanks to the auto-host, Olkesh. He claps his hands together in excitement. He's almost as enthusiastic as I am about the idea of me getting to join the League, which makes the fact that I have no idea what his name is rather embarrassing. It's not that I don't care, it's just that after a while henchmen just sort of blend in together. During training we were shown the video of the boss's speech at the Allied Nations. It was wonderful, half the room was in tears by the end of it. It's the one about how powerful countries abuse the vote system of the organisation to legitimise their actions, isn't it? I've seen it too, it's really good. It's not for nothing that Human Resources makes all the new recruits watch it. In just a few words, you can really feel what the boss is about. What makes him different from all the other supervillains out there. You don't need to worry so much, right from the heart, and you'll do fine. Besides, you're Sphinx's nephew, it runs in the family. Said so himself, didn't he? I groan. Ugh, don't even start. It's bad enough that people think I only got the opportunity because of him in the first place. The last thing I want is for it actually to be true. Getting into the League by my own merits is the only way I'll ever be taken seriously as a villain, by them and by everyone else. Not to mention, he has this weird idea about how spending all my time down here is not good for me. It's not something recent either. Because intelligence agencies were always looking for my uncle, we never stayed too long in one place. As a result, I was homeschooled for most of my life. But ever since I finished my high school studies 3 years ago, he's been trying to get me to enroll in college, an actual college with other normal people. At first it was just subtle hints and the occasional comment which I accepted as his way of showing he cared about my future. However, since last month he's been bringing a bunch of pamphlets home. He went as far as outright telling me that if I was having problems choosing, I should study engineering like he did. Speaking of the boss, when are you planning to tell him? I have managed to keep the application process a secret for the better part of a year, but it can't remain that way forever. As proud as it makes me that he hasn't found out yet, I'm no fool. I know that luck has played at least some part in it. Besides, I meant it when I told the henchman that my uncle is my biggest inspiration. Thanks for the hose, Leaky. His approval would mean a lot to me. The next time I see him, I suppose, it will be better if he hears it from me and not from the League after I get accepted. He hates being left out, and considering what I'm planning, he might just have a stroke. Well, here's your chance. He's heading our way. What? He was not supposed to come back until tonight. The henchman shrugs. I turn around and see my uncle walking through the door. He's never been a particularly expressive man, but he looks even more serious than usual. Good morning, boss! The henchman salutes him and my uncle dispenses him with a nod. As he leaves, he silently mouths, "Good luck," in my direction. Traitor. You're early. There was an explosion in the lab. There's toxic material everywhere, and since it will take clean-up crew a few hours to get rid of it, I told everyone to go home for the day. I look down and notice his clothes are stained with some kind of black substance. Instinctively, I take a step back. He looks down as well, shakes his head, and waves his hand in a dismissive gesture. This is just oil. I was working on some of my old prototypes when I was informed of the explosion. Anything I can help with, boss? No, I want to clear up some space in the storage room. I'll get rid of whatever I can't get in working condition. And how many times do I have to tell you that you don't need to call me that? Sorry, I spend so much time with henchmen it rubs off after a while. Among other things. Uncle, really, that was years ago and it only happened once. As far as I know, only because he got eaten by a shark before it could happen again. Yes. The time the feeding cage malfunctioned and our perfectly trained sharks decided to have him for lunch instead. What an unfortunate coincidence. The corner of his lips quirks up in an amused smile. I barely resist the urge to roll my eyes. Have you had time to go through the pamphlets? The entrance exams begin next month, so you have to submit your papers as soon as possible. I spoke with Madame Mantis. She says that if you're interested in moving to America, she'd be happy to help with anything you need. Ever since she retired, she has amassed quite a bit of contacts in the Board of Education. In fact, if you get everything else ready before Friday, she'll personally write you a recommendation letter. I've met her a couple of times. She was a proper villain, the kind of woman that never does things out of the kindness of her heart, meaning that he easily asked her for a favour, or she owed him one. Either way, I bet he's only telling me this so I feel pressured into enrolling. Hi, Dan. I'm glad you brought it up, because I've been meaning to talk with you about that. You have? Does that mean you've chosen a college already, then? Not exactly. Not exactly. Keegan, cut to the chase. What if I didn't want to go to college? He stares at me in silence for what feels like an eternity. Finally, he closes his eyes and begins to rub his temples. We've been over this before. You need to do something with your life. You do a good job around here, but you can't keep running around with a henchman forever. Wait, just hear me out. The reason I don't want to go to college is because I want to become a supervillain, just like you. In fact, I've already contacted the League. They think I've got a lot of potential, Uncle. They are just waiting for me to submit my full application. When did you even have the time to do that? Save it, that's not important. Helping me out and becoming an actual supervillain are two completely different things. The League's application process is infamously hard for a reason, Keegan. Many people have died trying to impress the Council. Why do you even want to be one? Uncle, please. I've gone through the curriculum of every major college in the world, several times actually. They've got nothing to teach me. I could go straight to a doctorate for about every field I'm interested in. Why should I waste my time with frivolities when I could be doing something that actually matters? You are the one that always says that people just don't know what's best for themselves. Well, I do. Besides, excuse me, I've been helping you out practically my whole life. I'm not exactly making an uninformed decision. I know exactly what I'm getting myself into. Are you sure about this? I've never been more sure about anything. Have you decided how you're going to call yourself? Do you have a base of operations? What about a plan? How are you going to pay for everything? Do you remember the weapons dealer that sold you the parts you were missing for the Death Ray? Turns out that he also handles mercenary contracts, and he comes highly recommended in that regard. He said that he would lend me one of his bases and some people if I went over a couple of blueprints his scientists are working on. Hi, Paul. I know it's not ideal, but it would only be for a day or two. After I'm accepted in the League, I'll have enough resources to get my own. He crosses his arms, and there's another moment of silence. If you are serious about this, I won't be the one to stop you, but you are going to do this properly. Call the weapons dealer and tell him that you won't be needing his services anymore. You'll use my lair and my men. We'll draft a contract, and if anyone asks, you rented them. Thank you, Uncle. I promise I won't disappoint you. Of course you won't. Now, come, tell me more about your plan. I don't trust the uncle. A month later. Location, National Museum of Science, Bonn, Germany. I pretend to adjust a strand of hair behind my ear, pressing the button in my earpiece to increase the volume. Boss, I'm in the control room. I've taken care of the security recordings. The police won't find anything of use in any of them. The men are all in their posts and ready to go too. They'll be waiting for your signal. I'll stay here for a little longer to keep an eye on things. Please let me know if you understood. I nod. All right, see you in the auditorium, boss. And as an aspiring supervillain, particularly one hoping to join the League, there are two things to be taken into account when it comes to carrying out plans. Visibility and chance of success. Just like there's no point in doing something so uninspired that it barely makes it to local news, there's no point in getting arrested on national television. Finding balance is key, and that's exactly why I've chosen Bonn's National Museum of Science as my target. It's a beautiful place, and just like its research centre hosts many important scientists, its vault is home to a lot of rare and expensive equipment. Despite that, under normal circumstances, there wouldn't be anything particularly worth stealing here. But starting today, the museum will be hosting the Schultz-Holt collection of rare minerals, its main piece being the famous Engeleuger diamond. Besides being one of the largest cut precious stones known to man, its purity and chemical composition make it one of the most versatile energy conductors in the world. In addition to the exhibit itself, the museum board has also invited Professor Schultz to give a conference at the end of the inauguration party. Schultz is both a geologist and a political activist, and he's greatly respected in both fields. To make sure that no other villain interferes, I told both the League and my uncle that I'd be planting bombs in the museum and holding the guests hostage for a ransom. Very few people are willing to risk getting blown up by a first-timer after all. But actually, my real plan is... Ooh, kidnap! Kidnap Professor Schultz. As a public figure involved in politics, Schultz's disappearance will be all the news we'll talk about for as long as he's missing. Kidnappings are hardly my area of expertise, but all things considered, they're pretty straightforward. It's not like we'll have to deal with him for long afterwards in any case. I'm certain that both the Americans and the Russians will be willing to pay a hefty sum to get their hands on him. If I had to guess, I'd say they'd want to claim they were the ones that saved him, making the other side look incompetent. Or maybe they'll use the opportunity to get rid of him while the blame falls on someone else. It's a great plan, even if I say so myself. My nerves don't kill me first, that's it. Until Schultz's conference begins, there isn't much for me to do except wait. The only reason I got here at the beginning of the inauguration in the first place was in case the henchmen needed me for something. Unfortunately, that also means that I've had plenty of time to go over the plan in my head, including all the little details that could go wrong. I hate to admit it, but my uncle was right. Being the mastermind of a plan instead of just another person helping out is a completely different experience. But it doesn't matter. When I join the League, I'll get to tell the story whichever way I want. None of the boring parts, none of the doubt. Everything was perfect on the first try. In the end, I decided to go grab a drink at the bar while I wait. The bar is actually more of a counter in one of the corners of the lobby than its own separate place. It's meant for people who want to get something to drink without having to find a place at one of the tables or wait for the servers to take their order. As I approach, the first thing I see is a man surrounded by a small group of people, most of them women. I can't get a good look at him from over here, but every once in a while the whole group erupts in laughter. After the third or so time that it happens, the bartender walks over from behind the counter and says something to them. He probably asked them to either lower their volume or leave, since the group began to disperse right afterwards. Now by himself, the man takes a seat next to another blonde man. Another blonde man. Why there are commas in there, I don't know. He leans back on the chair and begins swinging it back and forth. Ooh, hello. No wonder he was surrounded by women. He's pretty handsome. The man next to him isn't too bad himself either. Definitely a much better view than what I had in the lobby. A moment passes and the man in the tuxedo says something. They exchange a few words, but the expression on the blonde man's face is so unfriendly that they don't really go beyond that. If looks could kill. In any case, I don't have much time to think about it. At that exact moment, the first man turns around, and our eyes meet. I look away to see if he'll do the same, but he doesn't. Instead, I can feel him staring at me until I give up and look back. He makes a gesture at the bartender to order another whatever he's having. Now, with the additional glass in hand, he approaches, stopping right next to me and leaning against the counter. Ooh, his name's Hunter. What voice should we do for Hunter? I can't have everyone with a British accent. I can make him Irish. Having fun? From his body language and his accent. Oh no, he's American apparently. Okay, right. I gotta do an American accent. This is gonna be interesting. His accent. I say he's American. I wave my hand in a dismissing manner. Not really. Watching the governor try to explain the merits of mineralogy has been the highlight of my evening so far. These things are... no, that's a bit Australian. How do I do an American accent? I'm just going to go with Irish. Usually sounds like it's from Gloucestershire. Thanks, Dan. You tried. You should stream. And then do voices. And then we'll make fun of you, hey? These things are usually more lively. Well, as lively as events of those sort can get. Last time there was this professor from Columbia. What was his name? Anyway, he's convinced that Schultz's methodology is faulty, so he always ends up causing a ruckus whenever they meet. But this time, the committee... Yeah, he does sound a little bit like he's from Gloucestershire. I don't know, there we go. But this time, the committee made sure that the guest list is as inoffensive as possible. You didn't hear it from me, of course. Of course. Drink? He raises the glass towards me. I saw him order it, but I didn't see the bartender pour it, so of course I'm not going to accept it. I shake my head and pick up my own glass, almost empty by now from the counter. No, thank you. I already had one. He shrugs and takes a sip. It's quite good, isn't it? German alcohol's one of the only two reasons I'm glad that the Soviets only got to keep half the country. And the other one is? Germans. By now it's become clear that he's flirting with me. Whether he's actually doing a good job is a different point altogether. I decide to... Oh, totally flirt back. Well, two can play the same game. Let's see him put his money where his mouth is. Of course, one of those things is much more fun than the other. He laughs, puts down one of the glasses and offers me his free hand. I take it and give him a grin in return. The handshake lasts a couple of seconds more than strictly necessary, and instead of simply letting go at the end, he slides his fingers across my palm. I curl my fingers slightly so that they interlock briefly at the end. That does it. He begins ogling me in what's possibly the least subtle manner known to man. Johns, it's a pleasure to meet you. The pleasure is all mine. Don't take this the wrong way, but you look kind of young for an academic. I'm still an undergraduate. I'm hoping for a chance to discuss my thesis with Schultz before I submit it. Asking Schultz for his opinion about an undergrad thesis? That's quite a high bar you've set for yourself. Trust me, you don't even know the half of it. So, what is it about tonight? In simple terms, I'm researching ways to improve the accuracy of the tools used to locate and harvest petroleum deposits. It would make extraction quicker, cheaper, and more environmentally friendly. Right now it's all theory, but I'm pretty sure that my calculations will lead to it being applicable. That's quite impressive. All the better for me, I like him smart. Ah, sorry for making you yawn, Valvo. With a grin, he puts his hand on my shoulder and leans closer to me until his face is practically touching mine. Also, hi Jesse, yes, I did see that. His breath feels hot against my ear and mixed with the faint smell of alcohol coming from him. It's enough to send a shiver down my spine. Maybe we could discuss some of your ideas in private? I'm tempted. So, very tempted. But if I miss Schultz, my thesis supervisor will have my head. I take a step back and he lets go of my arm. What a shame, but I understand. Next time, then. He picks up the glass, chugs down the rest of the drink, and winks at me before turning around and walking away. As soon as he's out of my sight, I let out a sigh. What gall. If I had been anyone else, this could have ended uglily for him. Well, it doesn't matter. I'm not planning to see him again anytime soon. Aww. There's a buzzing sound from one of the nearby speakers, and I turn my attention to it. First call. Please proceed to take your seats. The conference will begin in 15 minutes. When the announcement is done, I head towards the auditorium. Other than the first 2 rows, which have been reserved for politicians and the press, the seats aren't numbered. Terribly inconvenient for people that would rather secure a good place without having to enter early, or wait too long in a line for it. On the other hand, it's perfect for someone like me that would rather not have a name attached to their tickets. When one of the ushers takes my ticket, I recognise him as one of my uncle's men, just like the henchman said. He directs me towards a free seat at the corner of one of the middle rows. Perfect. Nothing would ruin a dramatic entrance like having to ask people to stand up so I can get to the stage. Once I'm at the seat, it quickly becomes obvious why no one had taken it yet. Sitting next to me is the blonde man from the hall, reading the programme with an expression on his face just as unfriendly as the one he had back there. Excuse me, is this seat taken? He looks at me, shakes his head and goes back to reading without a single word. Under any other circumstances I wouldn't care, but come on, he talked to the other man at the bar and I don't get more than a side glance. It's entirely possible for him to just be some regular guy with bad social skills and poor German, but he didn't even attempt to answer in English either. I decide to give my gut feeling a try and, leaning closer to him, lowering my voice so that no one will hear, I begin to speak it to him in Russian. I've heard that Russians have a lot of trouble getting travel permits now, even those who have never been to the Soviet Union. I can't even imagine how hard it must be for actual Soviets to get out of their country. That gets his attention enough to put down the program and turn to face me. He looks like he's assessing me and trying to intimidate me at the same time. If I'm completely honest with myself, why am I interested in talking with him? Because he insists on ignoring me. It's a matter of pride, really. Being related to a supervillain and soon to be one myself, I may need to keep a low profile, but I wouldn't stand for being so blatantly disregarded. Having an interest in geoscience is not a crime either. His German doesn't have any less of an accent, but because he doesn't have to whisper, it's actually easier to understand. Of course not, but you do know that he'll be giving the conference in German, don't you? And frankly, the translators the museum usually hires are terrible. It's not even close to being the same experience. I am speaking with you, aren't I? My German isn't good enough. This is quite different from a scientific presentation. What do you really want? I'm just trying to have a conversation with the person sitting next to me. Why? Should it be about something else? No, of course not. We exchange a look of suspicion before he goes back to reading, not without hesitation. Seems like I'll have to keep an eye on him. Third call. Please remain in silence for the duration of the conference. We'd like to remind you that photography is restricted to authorized press. The lights of the room begin to dim until they turn off completely, and the auditorium's only remaining illumination are the spotlights above the stage. A man in a suit appears from the left end of the stage, followed by Professor Schultz. He stops at the podium, and soon any hopes of conversation are drowned by the audience's applause. Please welcome Professor Hans Schultz, head of the Schultz-Holtz Foundation. There's another round of applause, this time much louder. After a couple of seconds pass, Schultz holds up his hand and the whole room goes quiet. Slowly, the floor next to him begins to open, and everyone watches in awe as the case in it, which the diamond is kept, raises from it. I had seen pictures of it before, of course, but it doesn't compare to seeing it in person. Hi, Dopey. What on earth is that emoji? Malik Star? Yeah. Just looks like a face on a blue background. As you all know, the Engellauger is among the rarest gemstones in the world. Flawless both in its surface and its interior, it allows both heat and electricity to be conducted with minimal dispersion up to... I pressed the button on the side of my watch. I couldn't risk bringing too much equipment on my person, but I managed to fit both a communicator and a small laser in my watch. My signal, the doors burst open and the henchmen appear, whilst the ones that had been posing as ushers hurry to lock the doors behind them. My uncle only ended up lending me about half a dozen of them, but since the people inside have no way to tell, they are more than enough. There are whispers of confusion at first, but the room goes completely quiet when Schultz slams his hand against the podium. What is the meaning of this? Security, get these people out of here. I stand up and I'm escorted to the stage by that one henchman whose name I should probably know by now. While we walk, he goes ahead and hands me the control of the bombs. It's mostly for show, since we only wide enough bombs to mess up some of the less important rooms slightly, while the rest are decoys set to release smoke. Of course, they don't know that. There has been a slight change of plans, Professor. As I take the podium, I put down the control in front of me and I signal the henchman to restrain Schultz. They both get off the stage and he leads the professor towards the side of the auditorium.
Damas y caballeros, por favor permanezcan sentados. Si cooperan y hacen exactamente lo que se les diga, nadie saldrá herido.
Okay, apparently we do actually have some voices in Spanish, which is just weird. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, please remain exactly seated. Please remain seated. If you cooperate and do exactly as you are told, no one will get hurt. What are we talking about, stats? Yeah, the follow age is probably messed up, but the hours should still be fine, Minky. It doesn't reset your hours, I don't think. But also that was from like... That was from last stream, all the stuff about hours. That was yesterday. So your chat might be really messed up. When you look back to this moment in a few years, you'll realise it was the most important day of your lives. Scientific achievements, political careers, everything you've done will pale in comparison to this instance. And that is because today you become part of history. You'll have the... Yeah, we were mainly... Dan was mocking my voice again, and everyone was saying hello. You'll have the honour of witnessing the birth of one of the greatest supervillains known to man, Dr. Cyclops. As of right now, you also have the honour of being my hostages. Hopefully the government values your lives. Briefly interrupted by the sound of talking coming from amongst the seats, I decide to ignore it and continue. Enough to pay the... When it happens again, I stopped speaking and began to look over the crowd, searching out the source of the interruption. Most of the guests have either a look of fear or discomfort on their faces, and some of them even shake their heads when they notice me looking at them. What do I have henchmen for if they can't even keep people from talking at the same time as me? Finally, I notice the henchman is out of place, standing at the end of a row rather than at his place next to Schultz. He seems to be arguing with someone. I step down from the stage to get a better look, and I recognise the other person as the man from the lobby. "What are you doing? Sit down!" "I'm going to the bathroom, unless you want me to get sick all over the floor." He stands up and gives a few steps towards. Actually, it's more of an awkward stumbling. He looks really drunk. "Hey, I said you aren't going anywhere!" The henchman grabs his arm to stop him. Suddenly, the man turns around and punches him square on the nose, knocking him out cold in the process. "Oh no, cute henchman!" Stepping around the henchman's unconscious body, he puts a hand inside his jacket and takes out a gun. At first, I'm amused by the idea of getting shot by an over-eager drunk, and he manages to point it right at me just fine. "Agent Hunter, Global, you're all under arrest." Shit. People begin to turn to look at him, whispering to each other until the crowd's attention is divided between the two of us. Meanwhile, none of the henchmen move, unsure of what to do. The only security on site was supposed to be the museum's guards and some of the local police stationed outside. There was nothing to make us think that an agent of Global would be here, let alone armed. The henchmen could deal with him through sheer numbers alone, but I need them to keep control of the crowd. If everyone begins to panic, it's not going to be good for any of us. I decide to try and bluff, so I shrug and laugh it off. Nice try, but you wouldn't risk a shootout in a room full of civilians, or for me to blow this place sky high. I pick up the control and put my index finger on the big red button in the middle of it. See this? My men have put bombs all around the museum. One false move and I'll push it. With you still inside? No, I don't think so. As for your henchmen, my aim is pretty good, and something tells me none of them want to be the one that gets their boss shot. Guess we'll have to see who's faster. Get him! The henchmen are getting ready to fire when I'm blinded by a flash of white light. Out of instinct, I drop the control and raise my arm to cover my good eye, but the movement makes me lose my balance and I end up falling back. "Grenade! Everyone get down!" "Hold your fire." My vision is blurry, so much that I barely see the second flash of light when it goes off. I hear the people begin to scream, but the noise sounds distant, as if I was in another room altogether. It's not much of a relief, but at least that means they were flashing grenades rather than fragmentation ones. It takes a couple of seconds for my eyesight to come back completely, and a couple more for me to regain enough strength to be able to stand up. I look around. Half of the henchmen are on the floor, covering their ears in pain, and the other half still looks too confused to do anything. Upon realizing that no one is blocking their way anymore, the people in the seats begin to run towards the exits in panic, pushing each other and screaming. By the time the henchmen try to regain control of the situation, the whole room has descended into chaos. In front of me, Agent Hunter points his gun in my direction and begins to approach, or at least he's trying to. His hand is shaking so much that it's obvious that he's just as disoriented as I am. I frown. If it wasn't him, then who? He looks at me, then at the floor, and stops. I look down as well and realise why. It's the control. He hurls himself forward and grabs it. I take the opportunity to kick the gun out of his other hand, but he holds onto my leg and pulls me down with him. We both end up on the floor, trying to wrestle the control out of each other's hands. While Hunter may be stronger, right now I'm the one in better condition, so I manage to hold my own against him. We keep rolling around on the floor until I manage to flip him over and pin him down. Has someone ever told you that this is your best angle? Shut up and give it back. As we continue to struggle for the control, I notice someone get on the stage out of the corner of my eye. I turn my head and see the blonde man from the lobby walk up to the diamond's case and lift it up. It's a brief distraction, but it's enough to give Hunter the upper hand he needs to push me off him. When I fall back, the control is sent flying into the air, and Hunter and me stare at it as it lands right on the detonator. Well, shit. Of course nothing happens. That's a decoy, isn't it? Hunter shakes his head in disbelief, working at wiping a bead of spat from his brow with the back of his hand. But instead of looking angry, he seems rather amused by the whole situation. Having decided that his immediate business with me is done, he runs past me and onto the stage to catch up with the other men. They begin fighting over the diamond right away, trying to keep the other from getting a proper hold on it. They're pretty evenly matched at first, but the longer the fight lasts, the more Hunter struggles to keep up. Whoever the Russian is, it's clear that he's not just a random guest, or some other opportunistic thief. It'll be an easy mission, they said. No one cares about that old rock anymore, they said. Why does the KGB even want with it? Why won't you commies dislike anything that might be worth more than a ruble? Be quiet. The diamond is the property of the Soviet government. I've come to take it back. Global and the KGB? I knew there was something odd about those two. Good thing that I'm not here for the diamond. Let them fight over it while we get away with Schultz. I walk over to where the henchman is and nudge him away with my foot. He stands up holding the side of his head with a pained expression. His nose is bleeding from Hunter's punch, and he has a split lip. It's pretty lucky they didn't get trampled by people on their way out. Put yourself together. We need to get Schultz and get out of here before the agent notices. Can you help me get him to vehicle? Yes! Go tell the others to get out and get everything ready. I'll hold Schultz back in the meantime. He nods and goes running to where the other henchmen are. They still look confused from the grenade, but they're well enough shape to pick up their guns and head to the exit. Speaking of Schultz, where is he? The professor didn't leave with the rest of the people, and instead he's been watching both men fight over the diamond. He obviously cares more about it than for his own safety. He's even too distracted to notice us as I approach from behind. Professor, if you'll be so kind as to come with me. Schultz turns around alarmed. I'm about to grab him when there's a loud noise right outside the auditorium. I feel the floor move and I lose my step. The room quickly begins to fill with smoke and dust, and I cover my mouth and nose with my sleeve. What the hell? That sounded like a bomb, but how? Never mind, I'll figure that out later. Right now, Schultz is more important. The smoke gets thicker by the second, and soon it becomes impossible to distinguish anything more than a couple of meters away. I have just enough visibility to see two blurry figures through the smoke, each running towards the exit through different rows. One of them must be Schultz. The only people left here besides me and the henchman with the professor and both agents, who I'm pretty sure are still on the stage. Damn, it's too dark. I can't see their faces. Boss, where are you? Over here. Between the two of us, it should be enough to incapacitate Schultz and carry him outside. Once there, the others will take care of the rest. I start to run towards green suit. I run towards the man in the green suit and tackle him with all my strength. He's a lot more sturdy than I would have imagined, and I almost dislocate my shoulder from the impact alone. Ah. Soviets are fine. Play at least one of Sergei's routes. While I keep him on the floor, the henchman puts a hood over his head and ties his hands and feet. Even between the two of us, it takes a lot of effort to get him out of the building. He struggles so much that he actually kicks the henchman right in the nose at one point. Oh God, again! What do they feed these people? We get him into the trunk of the vehicle and head back to the base. While the henchman drives, I change out of the suit and into my usual clothes. Every once in a while, we hear the professor kick the trunk from inside as if trying to get out. It makes what is already a tense trip even more tense. Finally, after a couple of hours, we get to the lair. Sphinx's lair, currently serving as Dr. Cyclops' base of operations. Location, somewhere in Germany. Why are they speaking in Spanish then? A couple of henchmen help us get Schultz out of the trunk and into the laboratory. I had planned to simply sit him on a chair and put a guard at the door to keep an eye on him, but he gave us too much trouble on the way here for that. With how the day has gone so far, I don't want to risk him getting shot trying to escape. Do we still have that table with the straps? The one we used before they had the cell block? Yes. Bring it over and tie down Schultz. The less he can move, the better. He nods. Just as he's about to leave, he touches his nose, and he stops to gesture at the two other henchmen to go with him. Oh, thank you for the host, Mr. Coolness. They return a couple of minutes later, carrying the table with them. That thing is probably older than I am, and proof that half the things at this warehouse are there purely for nostalgic reasons. The henchmen put the table down in the middle of the laboratory and secure it to the floor. While two of them cut the ropes around Schultz's hands and feet, and lifting onto the table, the other straps him down to it. Schultz thrushes and kicks till the very last moment, shouting curses at us. At least, I think that's what he's doing. The hood muffles a lot of it, so it just sounds like distant yelling and heavy breathing. Well, despite all the setbacks, we did it. Congratulations, everybody. The henchmen nod and give me a half-hearted smile that made them look more relieved than happy. They probably thought I was going to blame them for what happened at the museum. Which, to be honest, I would have done if we'd have come back empty-handed. I still need to figure out how we missed 2 agents. Someone in intelligence is going to have to answer for that. But that's a matter for another time. Now, I get closer to the table, leaning over so that I'm right in front of the professor. At my signal, the henchman standing closest to Schultz grabs the hood covering his head and takes it off. You have given us a lot of trouble, Professor. Schultz? Oh no, it's the German! No, the Russian! Did we at least get the diamond then? But just as his face becomes visible, the whole room freezes. The man on the table is not Schultz. It's the Russian! You're... The henchman exchanged a nervous look between them for about a second, before turning to stare at me. I tried to clear my throat in an authoritative manner, but it sounds more like I'm trying not to joke. Keep an eye on him. Don't let him move a muscle until I come back. I take a couple of steps back, and as soon as I'm sure that no one can see me anymore, I run out of the lavatory. When he agreed to lend me the lair, my uncle did so with the condition that he spend the day working in his office. Close enough to keep an eye on me, but out of sight, so as not to be fastidious about it. At the time I wasn't too happy about it, but now I couldn't be more glad that he was so insistent. When I get there, I don't even bother knocking. Knowing that the door will be unlocked, I simply storm inside. Uncle! But instead of my uncle, I find Madame Mantis sitting behind his desk. As soon as she sees me, she stands up, walking over until she's close enough to put a hand on my shoulder. My first instinct is to try and compose myself and pretend that there's nothing wrong, so I force myself to smile. Madame Mantis, to what do I owe the pleasure? Oh, okay. I heard that you wanted to apply to the League, and I came to make sure that the Sphinx wasn't giving you too much trouble. I know he can be difficult. When he said that you'd give me a letter for college, I thought that maybe you also... I am, but only because it's always good to have more options. Your uncle and I hardly agree on this. Anyway, he saw what happened at the museum on the news and decided to do some investigating of his own. He asked me to stay here just in case. He should be back in a couple of hours. Hours? This just keeps getting worse. Your uncle is very worried about you. You're lucky he's already bald. Mantis pats me on the shoulder before moving her arm away. She then encircles me a couple of times before walking all the way to the door and locking it. Now, why are you really here for? I just wanted to let him know that I was back already and that I'm safe. You can't hide things from me, dear. Very few people can. You came running in and you looked like you just saw a ghost. If you let me help, we can figure something out before he comes back. I take a deep breath while I consider my options. The last thing I want is more people knowing about what happened than is necessary, but Mantis would gain nothing out of telling people I messed up. Besides, she gets along reasonably well with my uncle. There's a good chance that she really just means to help me. She's right. If I fix this before my uncle comes back, I can pretend it never happened. He doesn't have to find out at all. Things at the museum didn't go as planned, exactly. To keep it short, I decided to bring back a hostage. But I wanted to bring back one of the speakers, Professor Schultz. But the place was too dark, and with all the confusion, we ended up capturing a Soviet agent that was there instead of him. Now he's down in the lab, and I don't know what to do. I'm not going to tell you how badly you messed up, because I have a feeling that you're perfectly aware. First of all, take another deep breath. You can't appear nervous when talking to an hostage. Does it look like you could have some kind of important information? I guess. I mean, at the very least, you should know why the Soviets wanted the diamond. He said it's because it used to belong to them, but I'm not sure about that. The timing is very strange. It could have come through at any other time. Do you think I could ask the KGB for a ransom, or hand him over to the League? No, I doubt he's important enough for the KGB to pay for him. He won't be of much use to the League if that's all he knows. Soviet agents operate on basically a need-to-know basis, and KGB's policy regarding captured agents. Scraps online is always to assume they have been compromised. Ugh, great, he's useless then. Not exactly. I know a couple of people that still do work inside Soviet territory from time to time. Any information about why an agent was in the museum would be of interest to them. They will have some leverage to the League. They are the type that don't like owing favours to others. If you make sure that no one finds out it was an accident, you can make this look good enough for your application. Get him to talk, make all of this seem intentional. Yeah, I can do that. Thank you, Mantis. I am about to turn around to leave when she moves in front of me and takes my hands into hers. Don't forget, Keegan, you're in charge here. She squeezes a little harder, enough to make my fingers hurt. Besides, if it comes down to it, you can always kill him and dispose of the body. I'm sure that won't be necessary, Mantis. Of course not. She laughs, letting me go before heading to unlock the door. I'm not sure if I'd go as far as to say I feel confident, but now I realise that I deal with far more intimidating people on a regular basis, and I do it pretty well. If I don't let them throw me around, some Soviet agent isn't going to be the one to ruin my plans. The first thing I notice when I enter the laboratory is that all of the henchmen are gone, except for the one that helped me bring the Russian here in the first place. In their place, there are a couple of armed guards on either side of the table. The change did the opposite of easing the tension in the room, and both guards looked slightly uncomfortable as they acknowledged me with a nod. I wave my hand and they both step aside and make room for me. I clear my throat to get the attention of the agent. He raises his head and the look he gives me is enough to send a shiver down my spine. It's like he's considering all the ways he could kill me. This explains why the henchmen left before the guards. I remember what Mantis said to me as I straightened my back and I returned the stare. It soon becomes a staring contest, neither of us wanting to be the first to look away. Finally, it's me that gets unnerved and I cough to dissimulate. Sorry. I suppose it isn't hard for you to get out of your country after all, being an agent and everything. But since you're here already, let's see what we can find. Useful we can find for you, shall we? Here's the deal. I need information and you have it. If you answer my questions, I promise I'll let you go. I want to talk. Don't be so stubborn, I'll have it one way or the other. But you do get a say about how difficult this will be for you. This time he doesn't even bother answering. I try to appeal to him. With truth serum, the risk of accidentally poisoning was too high for my liking. Likewise, if I decide to torture the information out of him, the chance that he'll resist too much and end up dying from his wounds. Besides, I'm not really a fan of blood. Even just thinking about it makes my stomach turn. It would be much easier for everyone involved if he just decides to cooperate. Suit yourself, but I know what the KGB does to people that fail them. And even if you don't talk, just by letting yourself be captured, you've already failed. You know nothing. Don't I? Think about it. This is the perfect chance to start over. A new beginning away from everything. No one will know what happened to you except for me, and frankly, I couldn't care less. You just need to answer some questions and you'll be free. There's no need to die for your country. He hesitates for a moment before shaking his head. There always is. Don't you have any family, anyone you care about? You could help them this way too. Send them things, get them out of the Soviet Union. I have a sister. She was sent away for a chess tournament and never returned. I always wondered. I'm not surprised by the sudden confession, since that was exactly what I'd hoped for. But how he sounds when he says it. He even looks vulnerable for a second. But it doesn't matter. She was as good as dead the moment she left. I realised right then that perhaps I didn't think this through as thoroughly as I should have, because I suddenly feel less like pressing him for information. He was set on not saying a word when I was only talking about his job, but as soon as his family came up, his attitude changed completely. If there's something I can sympathise with, it's losing family. I'll find out what happened to her for you, then you can decide whether you'd like to speak after all. And I'm just supposed to believe you? No, of course not, but if you live, you can go and see for yourself whether it's the truth. You'll get water and something to eat. I'll give them orders not to mistreat you, but they'll make sure you don't escape, so don't try anything stupid. He tries to dissimulate, but I can see from the look on his face that the henchman is really wishing for Sergei to give him an excuse to hurt him. On my way out, I glare at him to make sure he doesn't get any funny ideas. I curse my moment of weakness all the way to the office. I was supposed to do one thing, get him to talk, and somehow I ended up promising something I'm not even sure I can do. For one, I'm not sure that we have such information at hand, and even if we do, I'm not sure I can access it. I almost forgot about Madame Mantis. She's probably still inside. Ugh. If I begin to go through the files with her there, she's going to want to know what I want the information for. Her advice immediately comes to mind, and it sends a shiver down my spine. While I try to think of a way to get her out of the office and somewhere else, I see one of the henchmen passing by. It's just some random guy from maintenance, which makes him perfect for what I have in mind. Hey, you! He looks around and points at himself, as if I'm making sure I'm talking to him and not someone else. I gesture at him to come closer. Yes, you. Are you busy? He shakes his head. Do me a favour, head to the lower levels and call Madame Mantis. I don't care what you call her for, just make sure she's busy for as long as possible. Luckily for me, most of the base's personnel don't deal directly with her very often, so as far as they're concerned, are about equally as intimidating. And I have the advantage of being related to the boss. The henchman turns around, hurriedly heading towards the nearest elevator. About minutes pass until I see Mantis come out of the office looking annoyed as she walks down the hall. As soon as I'm certain she's gone, I go inside and lock the door behind me. I spend the better part of an hour staring at the monitor as I go through the files. Finding one that isn't classified is hard enough already. Finding one that doesn't require me to mess with my uncle's computer more than necessary is even more so. What's the deal with this man? I've seen world leaders whose files are less protected than his. Anything remotely related to him is classified 10 times over. Finally, I found one that looks promising enough. It's a list of notable people that defected, compiled for the purpose of letting supervillains know people that might be willing to work for them. Because it had hundreds of names and most of them aren't actually important, it must have slipped through the cracks. I keep scrolling until I find someone that matches Sergei's description, who I'm pretty sure is his sister. There aren't many female chess players that left the scene after an important match after all. Ah, she moved to America under a new identity, that makes sense. From the looks of it, she retired from chess and has been living a quiet life. Is that a dog sliding in water? Hi, Scruff. She's been living a quiet life since then. In the end, I don't find much information beyond that, but at least it's better than nothing. While I go over the files once more to make sure they're just as I found them, I pick up the phone and call the lab. When the henchman answers, I can hear the guards arguing with each other in the background. It's not a good sign. I've got what I need. I'll be down in a minute. Go tell the guards to ready the vehicle and to deliver Sergei to the garage when it's done. I want him tied up and blindfolded. We'll drop him at the nearest city. The henchman takes too long to answer, and since I just know that's a sign he's about to protest in some way, I continue talking. The sooner he's out of here, the sooner this is over with. Maybe it will even look like we know that what we're doing if there isn't an angry Russian in the middle of the laboratory by tomorrow morning. Ray's missing. He doesn't sound too convinced as he hangs up, but I honestly couldn't care less about his opinion at this point. When I get back to the lab, I expect to see the henchman escorting Sergei outside, maybe with the help of a couple of guards. Those are my instructions, after all. Instead, I find just the two of them standing in the middle of the room. Sergei has a red cloth covering his mouth, and his hands are handcuffed behind his back. The henchman is struggling to push him towards one of the back doors, but they aren't heading towards an exit. The door in particular leads to the aquarium, where my uncle keeps his sharks and other dangerous aquatic life forms when they are not in use. What are you doing? I told you to get him out of here. The henchman turns around, and for a moment he has a look of annoyance on his face, but it quickly changes to something more apologetic as he realizes who he's talking to. Boss, I thought... I don't care what you thought. Do I have to do everything myself? Move aside, I'm escorting him on my own. He doesn't move, so I end up pushing him out of the way and grabbing the back of Sergei's coat. Given how much taller he is, I have to stretch my arm upwards to get a proper grip. If I wasn't so angry, I'd feel rather ridiculous. Yeah, that's what I just said. Old Cash Ray's not here. But instead of staying out of the way, the henchman moves ahead of us and pushes the button that locks the door. Ooh, hello. What do you think you're doing? Something I tried very hard to avoid. You just couldn't kill him, could you? You had to go and make everything more difficult. Now I'll have to kill you both. Put your hands on your head and stand next to Sergei. I stand still for a moment, trying to make sense of the situation. But before I can say or do anything, I see him put a hand inside his shirt and take out a gun. He's pointing it at us, his finger resting on the trigger. I let Sergei go and take a step backwards. Suddenly he breaks his handcuffs, and with his hands free, he rips the cloth covering his mouth. The henchman hesitates, and that second is all Sergei needs to grab him in a chokehold, pulling him away from the door while trying to get him to drop the gun. Quick, open the door. I get to the keypad, but nothing I do unlocks the door. I can't activate the alarm either. It's the only thing I get when I try is an error message. He overrode my codes. Sergei isn't any more successful, and the henchman elbows him so hard that he knocks him backwards, and he has to take a moment to catch his breath. Since I can't do anything about the door, I begin going through the drawers, desperately trying to find something useful. All I manage to find is a small handgun, so we'll have to do. Unfortunately, I'm not a good shot, and between my nerves and my lack of practice, I don't even come close to hitting the henchman when I fire. It's enough to startle him, however, and Sergei used the opportunity to run towards me. He pushes the table on its side and we both duck behind it, using it as a cover. Almost immediately he snatches the gun away from my hand. Hey! The one who can actually The one who can actually shoot a target at point blank range gets the gun. Specifically because we only have 5 bullets left. Don't move. He leans to the side slightly, just enough to get his hand and part of his head from behind the table. Fuck, I can't see him anymore. You two know each other, don't you? He looks at me for about a second before he turns around and goes back to keeping an eye on the laboratory. I'm pretty sure that he's not going to answer me, but then he sighs. His name is Yakov. We used to work together before he defected. I had heard the rumors, but I didn't think he'd actually become a mercenary. He's a shame for more than just a KGB. He's a shame for the whole Soviet Union. I didn't recognize him at first, but when he spoke to me, I realized that it was him. A mercenary? That's impossible. He's been here for months. I conducted all the interviews around the time he was hired myself. I'd have noticed if there was anything suspicious. Sergei gives me a skeptical look. Admittedly, being shot by someone I hired is not the ideal situation to argue about my ability to judge people. He said his original contract was for someone called Sphinx. He hesitates a little before saying the name, as if he was trying to recall exactly where he'd heard it before. Uncle. I don't find out whether he remembers, because it's me who messes up. I bite my tongue, but it's too late. In the heat of the moment, I let it slip that we're related. Came here for your uncle? Do you really want to talk about that right now? Yes. He's interrupted by the sound of an alarm as the white light of the laboratory lamps is replaced by an intermittent red flash. Why is everyone only percentage here? This is my stream. It's very important. Everyone should be giving it 100% of their attention to my very, very bad accents. What's that? Shit. That's why he didn't shoot us when we ran to hide. It's the evacuation alarm. And it can be activated from any room? Is it just for evacuation? By anyone with a code, yes. It wouldn't be much of an alarm otherwise, would it? More importantly, once activated, it purges everything inside the base. It's basically a self-destruction sequence. How long do we have? About 20 minutes, give or take. It depends on how much data the computer has to erase beforehand. No, don't talk to me about pain. My knee is agony right now. Think. I overrode my code, but my uncle's can't be, because it's also the master password. There's nothing I can do about the alarm, but I can use another code to open the door. Then we can get out. Good. Stand up then. What? If he doesn't shoot, he's gone. If he shoots, I can see where he's doing it from and shoot back. Except he has to shoot me for that. Sergei glares at me, and I get the impression that if I don't stand up on my own, he's just going to throw me aside anyway. So I do it. Mere seconds later, a bullet grazes my arm from behind one of my uncle's machines. Sergei notices it too and quickly shoots twice in succession. The first one hits the henchman in the arm, making him drop his gun, and the second goes straight through his leg, making him fall down. Sergei runs towards him and kicks the gun as far as he can, then uses his free hand to forcibly drag the henchman from behind the machine. I take a second to check my arm. It hurts like hell, but it's not too bad, nothing that will cause permanent damage at least. Deciding that it's as safe as it's going to be, I go to the keypad and begin to work on unlocking the door. Just like I'd thought, the henchman had no way of disabling my uncle's code, so it's a matter of trying them all until I find one that works and the door opens. Done. Let's get out of here. What do you want to do with him? I take a look at the henchman, who's pressing his hand against his wound to slow down the bleeding. If it were for me, I'd just leave him here, but something tells me that my uncle is going to want to have a word or two with him once he finds out about all of this. Right, I suppose we should take him with us. You're lucky it wasn't Sphinx who had to go through this. Who says he wasn't? You haven't seen him since you arrived, have you? Mantis did. Are you sure? I make a pause while I think. Actually, no. She said he'd gone to take some care of some business before I arrived, not that she had seen him. We both know that the hangar is all the way to the side of the base. You won't make it in time if you decide to take me with you. Since thanks to Sergei, I can't walk on my own. So you can either go looking for him, or you can make sure that we all get out of here together. But you can't do both. I could leave you with Sergei. He looks just as upset as I feel. Sure, leave the two Soviets together. What could go wrong? No, go check on my uncle. Damn. Even if the possibility of my uncle needing me is more important than this idiot, there's no need to think about it twice. Just leave him. You can come with me and we'll talk about what'll happen later. Sergei seems to hesitate for a moment, but in the end he hits the henchman with the butt of a gun, knocking him out before following me outside. Outside the laboratory, the base is in total chaos. Henchmen are running back and forth, some of them carrying stacks of paper with them, others are trying to move pieces of equipment. They ignore me as I try to get their attention until I physically stop one of the technicians by putting my hands on his chest. When and where was the last time you saw my uncle? At his office, sir. 2 minutes ago. He was with Mantis. When we get to the office, the first thing I see is Mantis leaning over the computer, typing desperately while my uncle goes to the drawers at the same time. I can't help letting out a sigh of relief just loud enough to get their attention. Mantis looks up for a second before going back to work, but my uncle stops whatever he's doing and runs to meet me. At first I think he's going to hug me, but then he puts his hands on my shoulder and begins to angrily shake me back and forth. Of all the irresponsible things you've done, this is by far the worst. How did you manage to activate the alarm? I didn't. Then who did? Because as far as I know, no one else would dare touch it. My uncle stops shaking me, then takes a step back. It looks like he's finally about to lose his patience and hit me. But before he can do it, Mantis claps her hands together to get our attention. When we turn round, I see that she's waving a diskette in her hand. Boys, please. You can fight all you want when we aren't about to blow up. It's ready, Sphinx. He nods, picking a paper from the desk before turning around and leaving. He makes sure to glare at me one last time, though. As we head out, Mantis grabs me by the arm, pulling me closer so they're walking side by side. It takes a conscious effort to be able to keep up with her since she's taller, but the position at least means that she can lean down and whisper in my ear. Sergei, who had been standing outside by the door, waits a moment before beginning to walk, and then remains at a cautious distance of a couple of steps behind us. That's the Russian, isn't it? If you told me he looked like that, I'd have suggested that you keep him. Mantis, it's not like that. Are you sure? Because if you don't want him, I might just keep him for myself. She laughs, like we weren't all still in mortal danger, changing her hands from my arm to around my shoulder. It takes us about a month to get the layer back into... Oh, the pleasure will be all mine. Kidnap the professor and reach Sergei's A ending. It takes us about a month to get the layer back in good enough shape to use, which basically means the offices and rooms have been repaired and pretty much nothing else. My uncle was furious, of course, but I managed to get him to calm down quite a bit by taking over the reconstruction project myself. It also helped that Mantis convinced him that the task is not only arduous enough to be a punishment, but that he'd use the free time to take a much-deserved vacation. Probably the biggest winner of this is Sergei, whose decision to stay here we've all been too busy to question. I can't really blame him though, since it's not like he has anywhere else to go, and he can't look for his sister without resources, or at least a lead. He's actually incredibly competent too, to the point that he's basically become my second-in-command. I'm going over the budget for the new laboratory when I hear Sergei come in and lock the door behind him. He waits a moment till I gesture for him to approach. When he's close enough, he puts the paper on top of the desk. It's a letter from Human Resources, probably to remind me that I owe the henchman overtime or something to that effect. Before I can read it, Sergei clears his throat to get my attention. I want to make it official. Make what official? My job. You've been here a month. Trust me, you've got a job. These are just words on paper. No, that I promise it goes both ways. You do know that you're free to leave any time you want, right? You're not doing this under the assumption that I'll turn up one day on your doorstep demanding that you repay some kind of debt, are you? I know, and I've given it a lot of thought. You are right, just like my sister was right. I served the party for pretty much my entire life. Many times they asked me to die for the sake of my country, and I was always willing. But that time it was different. To die to a man like Yakov is to die a traitor's death, forever staying in my family's name. Sergei takes the pen out of his pocket and puts it on the desk next to the letter. Mantis told me about your application to the League and how you are hoping to use me to get in. I want to help. And what do you get out of it? I help you, and use the League's resources to help me reunite with my sister. Sergei rests his hands against the desk, practically leaning over it. Even if I'm pretty certain that he wouldn't go as far as to physically stop me from getting up, between the tone of his voice and the look on his face, it sure feels like it. You know, I would less thinking to do if the last Russian I met hadn't ended up bleeding all over my floor. And because I shot him, I remember. This will have to wait until we're done rebuilding, though, just so I don't give my uncle a heart attack. How does number 2 sound to you? Ooh. When I stand up to give the pen and paper back to him instead of just grabbing them, Sergei takes my hands into his and kisses my knuckles. Aww. I'm left staring at him until he moves away and our eyes meet when he looks up. Briefly occurs to me that it might just be messing with me by acting over the top about this. But his expression remains as serious as when he was talking about his sister. After an awkward moment of silence, I clear my throat. It sounds just about right. Was that all you wanted? No, I also came to tell you that you have a visitor. She's waiting outside. Whatever moment we may have shared is ruined so thoroughly that in that instance it almost feels intentional, and I let out a groan. The guards didn't inform me before letting her inside because they said they recognized her from previous visits, so they thought it would be unnecessary to interrupt either of us. Well, who is it? They aren't sure what her name is. Seriously? I have already removed them from their posts. They'll be on cleaning duty until I can establish whether it was a genuine oversight or something else. Good. I think all of the women I know, and admittedly this isn't very long, even less when I cut it down to the ones who've ever been here. Perhaps. But she's not supposed to be back yet. I'm about to tell Sergei to let who I assume is Madame Mantis in when the door opens and she comes walking in. Sergei and I exchange a look of confusion, and Mantis dangles a key between her fingers before putting it away in her handbag. The fact that she has a copy is rather worrying, but not surprising. Most likely recognizing her from the last time, Sergei moves out the way as she approaches the desk. Mantis takes a quick look at him, then turns and faces me with a grin on her face. You've been busy. Making this place presentable, I mean. She shoos Sergei away with a hand gesture towards the door. Could you leave us alone, handsome? The doctor and I have some things to discuss. Sergei looks at me, waiting for instructions. I trust Mantis' judgment, so if she thinks we should keep whatever she came to talk about private, so be it. I nod, and Sergei goes ahead and walks out the office. I thought you were with my uncle. He didn't decide to come back early, did he? Because we're nowhere near done. No, quite the opposite, in fact. Which is why it makes me so glad to see this place in one piece. It would have been a shame to have to tell Sphinx otherwise, when I just managed to talk some sense into him. I don't think I'm following. He's joining me for a trip I've been dying to make for a while now, a whole 6 months travelling around the world and meeting old acquaintances. Of course, neither of us could leave business unattended for so long. Then it occurred to me, I already know the perfect person to take care of everything. Why, if everything goes so well, you might end up in charge when we retire. How did you even get him to agree to that? I messed up a simple kidnapping, and this whole place blew up because of it. My assistant is a former KGB spy. Oh, Keegan, you should see how badly some people do while no one's looking. Being a supervillain is not only about the successes, it's about how you recover from the failures. You've got a bright future ahead of you, and what I finally got your uncle to understand is that it's the sort of thing that you can't run from. Not forever, anyway. So he can either support you and be part of it, or try and stop you and watch from afar as you do it anyway. I don't know what to say. Of course you do. You're going to say yes, and you're going to treat me to dinner so you can tell me how amazing I am for making it happen. And you're going to tell me everything about that KGB man of yours. Again, I said so already. It's not like that. Come on, dear. I'm neither blind nor dumb. Besides, your face is all red. I immediately raise a hand to touch my face, and Mantis gives me a knowing grin. Got you. Hopefully this one won't get eaten by a shark, She gets up and circles the table, hooking her arm under mine so I can lead. Now be a gentleman and show me what you've done with the place so far. Perhaps things didn't turn out exactly like I planned, but there's still a lot of work ahead. After all, what's the point in being a supervillain if I can't have a little fun? The end. So that was just over an hour. Question mark. Well, I mean, it's not meant to be a long game. It's a visual novel. It's got, if you just like scroll through, you know, if you just scroll through stuff like really quick without reading it, then you get it done much quicker. But I wanted to do a route through. Cheesy music is making me crack up. So, question is, do we go for the whole completion on stream? There's probably going to be a lot of fast forwarding and some bits. Do we try a whole different route? Or do we play something else? What do people think? That's a very good point. Okay, well then we will switch to, I don't know, Cat Quest maybe. Do some of that first, see how far we can get with that. And we will end this part of the stream here. If you want to find out what else happens in this game and how much of a supervillain you can be, or how many men you can sleep with, then you can buy it. It's really not expensive. I think it's like £4 or something. $5. This should work. There we go. It's $4. It's not even. Yeah, it's not even $5. It's not even $4. So it's like £3 for this. Yeah, vaguely erotic supervillain game. Which I've actually enjoyed, so I will play through without the silly voices, the stories to find out my endings, but for now, I've been Joe, otherwise known as Angel SK. Stay tuned. Thank you for watching. I'll be back in 2 minutes.